Here is a story about Mahatma Gandhi visiting a school. He met up with many of the teachers. One announced, "I teach history." Another added, "I teach mathematics." Still another said, "I teach Hindi." It continued like this. After meeting all the teachers, Gandhi innocently inquired, "So, who teaches the children?" A child's world is largely defined by early experiences, by what is learned in school. So, what do they learn? Often children with disability go to special schools. Girls go to girls' schools. Minority groups go to minority schools. And when these children grow up, they often continue to see the world in these watertight compartments, with little familiarity, understanding, or acceptance of anyone outside their own little world. Which is why worldwide, inclusion is being accepted as the best approach for education. A school for all, irrespective of gender, socio-economic status, religion, or ability.
इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन का ये मतलब है कि शिक्षा को इस तरह से तैयार करें जिसमें हर बच्चा सफल बने.
An inclusive school does not help any single category of children. It benefits every child. Because every child has something to learn or share with another. Because every child needs to accept and respect differences. Sounds utopian, doesn't it? Can it actually happen? How will it work in a class with children with varying interests and varying attention spans, where every child has a unique learning style? AADI, along with REACH, started a project in New Delhi, India.
इसमें हमने 5 गवर्नमेंट स्कूल लिए जिसमें हम ये जो पूरा मॉडल है होल स्कूल डेवलपमेंट का, पूरा टीचिंग लर्निंग प्रोसेस से लेकर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर से लेकर कल्चर, पॉलिसीज, प्रैक्टिसेस जो भी स्कूल में हो, उन सब का सुधार इस प्रोजेक्ट में हम प्रोपोगेट कर रहे हैं. और अपना जो स्पेशल स्कूल था उसको हमने इंक्लूसिव स्कूल बनाया.
Through this project, the key belief was that changing any one facet of the school would never be enough. The whole school had to change for inclusion to become a reality. It was an ambitious thought. The reality, however, was daunting. Government schools in India are mired in bureaucracy. The physical infrastructure is limiting. A single teacher often needs to teach 70-odd students in a small, cramped space. And creativity or innovation is near impossible. Almost inevitably, the children are stifled in this atmosphere. And the administration, the staff, the management don't see any need to change. And inclusion will never happen unless they believe in the concept. In AADI, many years of debate, based on feedback from the students, had at least resulted in a firm belief within the organization that inclusion was the way forward.
When they came back, they said they were prepared for the academic part, but they were not ready for the social emotional aspects of the community. And we realized they've always been in a protected environment which is always accepting, and the world is not like that.
The most basic criterion for an inclusive school is diversity. The school needs to be open to every child in the neighborhood, irrespective of gender, caste, religion, or ability. It needs to have a zero rejection policy.
The neighbors here knew us as a school for children with disability, and we actually went in the neighboring colonies doing the street play to educate people about the nature of this place and why education is about everybody and not only about few.
Soon people in the neighborhood like Rani's mother heard about the school.
ऐसा ही कोई हमारा मतलब जान पहचान है ना, उसका लड़का लड़की को पहले भेजा था यहाँ पे. उस समय पूछा था, वो बड़ा बहुत अच्छा स्कूल है, यहाँ पे भेज दो. तब से मैं रानी को यहाँ भेजा. 3 साल हो गया रानी का पूरा यहाँ पे.
There was an interesting fallout when children from varied backgrounds joined the school. Many parents with children with disability were not happy with this shift. They thought that their children would not get the requisite attention in a mixed school. Other parents did not like their children studying with children with disability or poorer children. For the first time, the school saw children being withdrawn. At the end of 3 years, the school has an interesting mix of children. It does have a higher disabled-non-disabled ratio than is expected in an inclusive school. But this may be necessary till every school admits children with disability. The 5 government schools had almost no children with disability. 2 had a disproportionately low number of girls. Admission drives were held to give information to make the admission process easier. However, there were still many children out of the schooling system, like Saurabh.
गौरव भाई के साथ उसको स्कूल में डाल दिया। वहीं ये सिर्फ 5-6 महीने पढ़ा। उसके बाद वहीं इसको फिर सीज़र आते थे, रेगुलर आते थे सीज़र, तो वहाँ के स्कूल के प्रिंसिपल ने मतलब इसको निकाल दिया स्कूल से कि हम मतलब इस बच्चे को नहीं रख सकते यहाँ।
Saurabh has been out of school for many years, since the school does not know how to cope with his condition. At the age of 8, he still goes to a play school instead of the school that his siblings attend. But it is difficult for children like Saurabh to return to school because they are older and require additional inputs before they can rejoin the neighborhood school.
हाँ, इच्छा तो उसके अंदर जागृत है कि मैं भी स्कूल जाऊँ और बच्चों की तरह मैं भी करूँ।
But just being in a school is not enough. For inclusion to work, the school also needs to provide education of a certain quality. We need to raise the bar and improve the standard of teaching learning in every school. But how does this work in an inclusive class?
You know, any class anywhere in this world would be an inclusive class because you have children belonging to different cultural backgrounds, different socioeconomic, whatever, status. You have children with different interests, different personalities. So I would really feel that, you know, different cognitive levels. So I would really feel that any class would be an inclusive class.
Each child may be different, but our education system does not take into account all these differences. It is structured around a generic average child, not for the variety that exists in any classroom. So how is the teacher going to work out a system by which she can reach every child? She first needs to understand the home context of the child. She needs to make the parents part of the process. Most schools do involve parents, but in a perfunctory manner. The traditional belief is that education is the responsibility of the school, but this is not true. A huge part of the child's learning happens outside school. So we need to think of the child's education as a joint responsibility of the parents and the school. There needs to be a partnership between the two.
Initially, we work at sharing more information with them about the school, about education, about how children learn. We share the curriculum with them. We help them to understand. Many of them are not literate, so we translate the curriculum in Hindi. We simplify it for them to understand what we are learning. After this whole thing has happened, then we expect them to participate much more in the school processes.
For example, in AADI, the assessment process was simplified, and both parents and teachers would evaluate the child on various parameters. This was in keeping with the idea that the parents were equally responsible for the child's education.
We have parent committees of transport and safety security. We have an admission committee in which parents are, and the parents make it more objective. Parents are quite participative in the whole process.
In the government schools, there was little communication between the parent and the school after admission. An attempt was made to open channels of communication by organizing parent-teacher meetings where both sides could discuss issues. The teachers were not very happy with this. They were not used to being questioned. In one of the schools, a parent group got together to try and change school policies.
जब से इंग्लिश के बारे में बात करी है, जब उसकी तरफ तो कोई तवज्जो ही नहीं है, ज़्यादातर उर्दू ही पढ़ाया जा रहा है.
The parents were not happy with this.
हमने यहाँ पर सबसे सिग्नेचर कराया, फिर हमने प्रिंसिपल मैडम को दिया और वहाँ पर उन्होंने प्रिंसिपल ने ये कहा था कि हम आपकी सुनवाई पूरी करेंगे.
As a result of this, the subjects were eventually taught in English. The teacher the most crucial interface between the ideals of inclusion and the reality of the classroom, also needed to redefine her role. So far, AADI had only special educators, since the organization had only worked with children with disabilities. Now, there were many general educators too, and it was necessary to find a balance in their roles within an inclusive classroom.
Initially, there was this kind of a divide, which wasn't conscious, but unconsciously it used to happen.
I found that the special educators were not very comfortable teaching in a group. They were much more comfortable teaching smaller groups or maybe in a one-to-one, and whereas I wasn't comfortable teaching a single child.
Like the special educators used to focus more on the children with disability, and the general educators used to focus on the larger group.
It took me about 6 months to settle down. Then, of course, it was like all children are children.
Every child is special in her or his terms.
This balance may have been arrived at in theory, but how would it actually work in a classroom? It is important to realize that academics is not the sole focus of the class.
It covers other areas of development as well, like socio-emotional development, communication, age-appropriate behavior and all.
But even taking this into account, how is Sheetal going to handle the diverse group of children in her classroom? She tries to work in innovative strategies and creative teaching aids into the detailed lesson plan she works out in advance for the class. She makes sure that there are adequate volunteers to support and help each child. She also works in individual goals for each child.
We work out different goals for different children. So they are just not compared on the basis of what the other child is doing or what is the average expected of class 1. It's basis of the potential of every child. Priyanka's thing was that she requires physical support while sitting. I had a discussion with her yesterday. So in that I came to know what all things she would like to share about this topic. And so I made those strips which had sentences on it. And so she was able to participate today. And we also used peer helping her out while doing that modeling.
Pooja is a child who can keep up with the class easily academically.
If she is able to complete whatever the task was given, and apart from that she is gaining कि किस तरह से उसको प्रियंका की हेल्प करनी थी या कहाँ पर उसको लगा कि शायद उसको इस चीज़ में मुश्किल आ रही है तो वहाँ पर वो सपोर्ट कर सकती है. It wasn't limiting her potentials. I felt it was more of an upward growth there. Sarthak is a child who gets restless and he likes to move around. Initially we used to have him sit at a distance and try out an activity, and gradually we used to reduce the distance, and finally like today you saw he was the part of the group and he did perform that paper tearing and pasting activity. For Raghav it was the goal of even if he sits for 4 to 5 minutes with an adult supervision, then that was the achievement for him. Even though if he is not at par academically, he is learning and gaining a much more thing like being a part of the collaborative group. It benefits all the children because children are different in all terms, and I feel somewhere or the other they are complementing each other.
What emerged is that the inclusive classroom needs a teacher with a new mindset. Not a special or a general educator, but a teacher who is dynamic and reflective and able to combine the skills of the two.
There has to be an open-mindedness in the teacher.
Basically, a lot of observation skills, a little bit of creativity is required.
Adaptations and accommodations have to be made.
Very much accepting of her own individuality, and she should be able to appreciate that in each of the children who's there in the class.
But how does this translate into other classrooms? To the government schools, where most of the teachers work with a standard, inflexible methodology. How can this teacher even be expected to change with little support in terms of additional staff, resources, infrastructure, and huge pressure to complete the curriculum? When these teaching strategies were shared with the government school teachers during the project, each reacted differently. Some were charged and felt motivated to try and change and innovate.
कई कैटेगरी के बच्चे आते हैं हमारे स्कूल में, जो इंटेलिजेंट हैं, जो डल हैं, उन सभी बच्चों को मिक्सअप करते हैं जिससे बच्चे एक दूसरे की मदद करते हैं और जो डल बच्चे हैं उनको भी सीखने में आसानी हो जाती है.
Inclusive education or play.
इन दोनों का मैं समझती हूँ बहुत अच्छा रिलेशन है और इससे हम अपनी एजुकेशन को बहुत बेहतर बना सकते हैं और बना रहे हैं.
However, many teachers reacted with skepticism. They believed that these ideas were impractical. They would challenge the trainers to try out their strategies in one of their classes. They felt that the pace of teaching slowed down considerably and they were unable to complete their curriculum.
सरकारी स्कूलों में क्या होता है कि एक स्टिपुलेटेड टाइम के अंदर ही एक जो फिक्स्ड सिलेबस जो होता है ना उसको कवर करना होता है, तो वो उसमें उसको पूरा करने की कोशिश करता है. ये एक ऐसा है कि एज ए मॉडल होता है. मॉडल में और एक्चुअल जो वर्किंग है या फंक्शनिंग जो है क्लासरूम की, उसमें काफ़ी डिफरेंस है.
At the end of 3 years, there may have been little change in the way schools operated, but the project did create an awareness about diversity. And among the teachers, there was the beginning of a dialogue and discussion on inclusion. And finally, it is all about the children. What does inclusion do for them? The child learns to share, to appreciate diversity.
मुझे ग्रुप में बैठना बहुत अच्छा लगता है.
Learning becomes meaningful, so she starts to enjoy the education process.
मैं जिस प्रोजेक्ट में काम कर रही हूँ उस प्रोजेक्ट में काम करना मुझे अच्छा लगता है.
Her progress is judged from where she is, not necessarily in competition with others.
हमें स्कूल आना अच्छा लगता है और हमें ड्राइंग बनाना अच्छा लगता है.
She has a say in what she learns, in the manner she should conduct herself in school.
हमने नियम बनाया था जैसे कोई क्लास से बाहर नहीं जाएगा, कोई शोर नहीं मचाएगा.
She grows and thrives because the classroom becomes a fearless environment.
नाटक करना चाहती हूँ, सिंगर बनना चाहती हूँ और डॉक्टर बनना चाहती हूँ बस.
It is clear that creating an inclusive school needs to be a dynamic, constantly changing process of evolution. It is not going to be easy because it involves a new way of looking at education. But once everyone involved in the process believes that this is the right way forward, all of this can be worked out. And what our fragmented world needs is our children to live with differences, to see the infinite variety around us, not as a source of conflict, but as part of the mosaic of life.